U.S. President Donald Trump says Russia and Ukraine are set to negotiate a ceasefire immediately. No time frame was given for any discussions following the president's separate phone calls with the leaders of both countries.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place. So.
In Mr. Trump's 2-hour call with the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin said Russia and Ukraine would need to find compromises to suit all parties. Russian and Ukrainian delegations did meet this past weekend in Turkey for the first time since 2022, bringing a limited exchange of prisoners but no pause in the fighting. Our correspondent Adam Zivo has more from the Ukraine.
So let's talk about the context of how this announcement actually occurred. Earlier this month, on May 9th, Russia celebrated its annual Victory Day parade. Putin unilaterally announced a 3-day ceasefire coinciding with his festivities. In response, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky proposed a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, which Russia then rejected. The day after Victory Day, a consortium of European leaders representing the coalition of the willing, so that would be the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland, came to Kyiv, and after having a conversation with Volodymyr Zelensky, they jointly announced a demand that Russia accept a unilateral 30-day ceasefire, which was supposed to begin on the 12th of May, on a Monday. Obviously, these demands were not in Russia's interest because Russia has insisted for several years that any ceasefire should come only after peace negotiations are concluded and should not be set as a precondition for any talks. And it is widely assumed that this is because Russia wants to press its military advantages to the greatest extent possible to extract further concessions from Kyiv. In response, Putin simply ignored the ceasefire and counter-proposed immediate peace negotiations within Istanbul. The coalition of the willing didn't seem that interested in accepting or even entertaining these peace talks because Russia has made no indication that it's willing to make reasonable demands. Putin has continued to insist that any peace deal tackle the root causes of the war between Kyiv and Moscow, which is code for the establishment of a Moscow-friendly puppet regime in Kyiv. Additionally, Putin has insisted that any peace deal require Ukraine to withdraw its troops from the 4 oblasts that Russia is currently partially occupying. So effectively, Russia is asking Ukraine to cede more territory as a precondition for peace. Trump characteristically upended things. He announced on Truth Social that he wanted peace negotiations to begin right away, and consequently, the coalition of the willing toned down its rhetoric concerning the imposition of harsh sanctions. The deadline for the 30-day ceasefire passed. Russia continued to bomb Ukraine, and it faced no sanctions as a result of Trump's intervention. The Istanbul talks collapsed predictably right away. They lasted for only 2 hours. The two parties were able to agree to a limited prisoner exchange, but everything fell apart after the Russians insisted that Ukraine cede these 4 oblasts that I mentioned earlier. The collapse of the Istanbul talks could have been a victory for Ukraine, as it would have allowed Ukraine's allies to say quite clearly that Putin is not interested in serious peace talks, therefore we need to impose sanctions. But Trump interceded once again and claimed on social media that Putin hadn't attended the talks simply because Trump wasn't there. In doing so, he gave Putin an excuse for his absence. In the days following the collapse of the Istanbul talks, Trump said that he was going to have a phone call with both parties, and that's exactly what he did. And after Trump had these 2 phone calls, he announced that both parties, both Ukraine and Russia, had agreed to immediately begin peace negotiations. Now, one thing you'll notice here, though, is that there is no requirement of any ceasefire between the 2 parties. So Trump had essentially pressured Ukraine into accepting Russia's preferred position, which is to negotiate while military hostilities are still ongoing and while Russia can still chip away at Ukrainian territory. Additionally, Trump positioned Russia as a potential economic ally and emphasized how much money could be made through trading with Moscow. The White House said that if Russia doesn't engage in good faith in these upcoming negotiations, then that could lead to further sanctions. But it's hard to take that seriously when Russia has quite obviously not acted in good faith up until this point, and that hasn't resulted in any consequences at all. In a better universe with a better, more reliable, more principled US president, we would already have European sanctions constricting the global trade of Russian oil. But unfortunately, Trump seems committed to giving Putin more and more and more chances to delay, 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 delay. Now, if there is any bright side to this, it's that Pope Leo XIV has volunteered to have the Vatican act as a mediator between the two parties. What this means is that Ukraine may be engaging in negotiations on friendly territory, given that Pope Leo has spoken out against Russian imperialism and has taken a quite pro-Ukrainian stance in comparison to his predecessor. So perhaps if these negotiations happen in this venue that might benefit Ukraine, it's unlikely that it will produce a real peace deal, but who knows, it might create some great photo ops or symbolic victories for the Ukrainian side. Not that that's sufficient, but it's better than nothing. So that's my take on things. I don't think that these negotiations are going to go anywhere. I think that this is Putin yet again playing Trump for the naive fool that he is. And I think that this is just another obstacle that Ukraine will have to overcome in its defense of its own sovereignty.